now. We went to the United States, and now we've come to the EU, trying to get a sense of what is going on here, and also to give people a little bit of a sense of what is going on back home. So, happy to take your questions.
Yes, please.
I have 3 questions, if that's okay.
Let's start.
Can we do one at a time, please?
Can we do one at a time? That's what I'll do.
All right. See, the first question is, what was the main message for the parliamentarians here? And what do you expect from them? What do you expect from Europe? Have you come with any sort of expectation that you tell them, give them a message, and then you want them to do something?
No. And it's more of a conversation than a message. I'm no one to come and give a message to the Europeans. It's an exchange of ideas about what is going on in India, what's going on here, the type of cooperation that we can do. So it's more of the frame is a conversation. We discussed with the parliamentarians across the board relationship between India and Europe, changing globe, transition, into a new sort of energy paradigm, into a new mobility paradigm. So that was what the discussion was about. It's very fruitful.
What's happening in India? What did you tell them? Could you elaborate a little bit, please?
Yeah, we were giving them a sense of the type of challenges India is facing, economic challenges, other challenges, the general sort of attack on the democratic institutions. So that's what we discussed.
Yes, go ahead. Yes. Can you speak a little louder?
Welcome to Brussels, and thank you so much for organizing this. So you're basically here on the eve of G20. Most of the European leaders are back in Delhi, and they're going to be meeting with Mr. Modi. They're going to be meeting with the government there. And my question to you is, do you feel with all of these... Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Do you feel with all of these meetings they're going to be having, the Western leaders, are they giving Hindu nationalism a free pass? Are they giving the persecution of Muslims and minorities a free pass in India right now?
No, I don't think. I think the G20 is an important conversation, and it's a good thing that India is hosting it. Of course, there are issues in India that we raise. But I don't think, I think the framing that are they giving them a free pass is not exactly correct.
But do you feel that obviously there's a war going on in Europe right now, and there's been this constant, I wouldn't say an allegation, but there is this aspect that India has close relations with Russia, and we've had European leaders talking to India about it. And do you feel in this aspect of trying to lure India away from Russia, they won't bring up the persecution of minorities and Muslims in India, leaders from the West?
No, I mean, India, of course, has a relationship with Russia. India has a relationship with the United States. India is a large country, and by nature of being a large country, it will have relationships with many other countries. So that's a normal thing. That's not, India has every right to have a relationship with whoever it wants. There is, of course, there are serious issues about the type of actions that are being taken with regards to institutions, with regards to democracy and stuff. And yeah, we would hope that there is a sense that there are underlying issues.
Can I just have a follow-up?
Hold on, no, please just. Yes, sir.
Dmytro Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. We know that the Modi government takes quite cautious position on the conflict and the war Russia held against Ukraine. So that I'm curious, what is the opposition point of view on the issue? And the related question, is that cautious position of the Indian government related to the sharp increasing of the oil supply of Russian oil to India?
I think the opposition, by and large, would agree with India's position, current position on the conflict. We have a relationship with Russia, and I don't think the opposition would have a different view than what the government is currently proposing.
Hello, I am from actually Kashmir. I would like to ask a question related to Kashmir issue. And what would be your policy if you came into the power next elections, hopefully? And recently, 4 years before, the Article 370 was abrogated, and even opposition leaders were restricted to visit and meet the people. And how you see the future of Kashmir? Thank you.
I mean, our position on Article 370 is very clear. It's in a resolution passed in the CWC of the Congress Party. I would urge you to take a look at that. Of course, we are for ensuring that every single person in our country has a voice, is allowed to express themselves, and we feel very strongly that Kashmir should develop, Kashmir should progress, and there should be peace in Kashmir.
Please.
Morning. Thank you very much, Pascaline Gabory, pilot for Dev. I just would like to know what are your next priorities, political priorities, and what will be your world vision in a context of growing tensions. Thank you.
What would be my
Your view on international relations in a difficult context that we are now.
I've been saying in all my meetings that it is pretty clear that China is proposing a particular view, a particular vision of the planet, right? And they are putting on the table the idea of the Belt and Road. And one of the reasons they are able to do that is because they have become a center of global production. And this is something I told the people yesterday in the External Affairs office. But I don't see an alternative vision coming from our side. That vision requires a vision for production in a democratic environment. What the Chinese have basically shown is that it is possible to produce effectively in a coercive environment where you don't give people freedom, where you restrict their freedom, but you offer them prosperity without political freedom. And the challenge for us is, can we provide an alternative vision where we do production under democratic conditions with political and economic freedom? And I think there's a lot of cooperation that can happen between the United States, between Europe, and between us. And I think that's where a lot of our focus should go. How can we create an alternative to the Chinese production model that is a coercive production model? A competitive vision.
Hi, this is Malini from PTI. You've given a very dignified answer to G20 happening in India is a very good thing. And we have news that Mallikarjun Kharge has not been invited for the G20 gala dinner by the BJP. And that says a lot. And I would like you to comment on that, because you are holding a very good stand, supporting the G20 happening in India. And here we have a very contrary, very, very interesting.
No, what's contrary about it? I mean, they've decided not to invite the leader of the opposition. It tells you something. I mean, it tells you that they don't value the leader of 60% of India's population, and it's something that people should think about. why they're feeling the need to do that, and what is the type of thinking that goes behind that.
I have a follow-up question as well. I was there in Paris to cover Mr. Modi's, Bastille Day parade event, and two things happened at that time, which is very controversial. There was a 17-year-old boy who was shot in France, and the French actually jailed about 1,000 people just so that the event would go peacefully. And at the same time,
I didn't
the Manipur
realize
issue
that.
happened, and the EU tried to raise that issue, but there was no conversation on that in the platform. Instead, there was a lot of retaliation from the Indian ministries regarding the same, that this should not be brought up. But we were actually talking of freedom at that time in France, and I thought that that issue should have been brought up. But what do you think about that?
About
Have you spoken about it here when you
about what?
about the Manipur issue, the human rights issues that we're facing?
Yeah, I mean, our position on Manipur was very clear. I actually visited Manipur, and I think we are very much for democratic rights, harmony, peace between people. I mean, as Sam said, I walked 4,000 kilometers for that very purpose, and I think there is a sense in India that the democratic structures of our country, the institutional structures of our country are under attack, and they're under attack from the group of people who are running India. I don't think this point is missed by anybody. I think everybody who has even a little bit of an understanding of India knows this. But of course, there are other considerations. So when you're dealing with India these days, there are other considerations which are also important, as you would be well aware. The democratic fight and the fight for democracy in India is ours, and it's our responsibility, and we will take care of it, and we will make sure that the sort of onslaught on our institutions, on our freedom is stopped. The opposition will make sure it happens.
Yes, sir.
सर मैं नाम यूनुसान मैं आज तक के लिए काम करता हूँ मैं अपनी भाषा में आपसे क्वेश्चन करूंगा आप 6 रोजा दौरे पे आए हैं तो उसका बुनियादी मकसद क्या और आपकी कल बेल्जियम और यूरोपियन पार्लियामेंटेरियन से मुलाकात रही है तो वो कैसे रही
आप हिंदी में जवाब चाहते हैं या इंग्लिश में? You decide. You ask.
These are both other people.
Okay, I'll no, the aim of the visit is to meet our diaspora here, to engage with them, to get a sense of what they're dealing with, what they're going through. That's one aspect. The second aim is to meet members of the government here, MPs, other people, and to get a sense of how they are seeing India, how they're seeing the possible cooperation between India and Europe, how they view India, what they think India should be doing, and also giving them a bit of a sense of what we think our relationship should look like.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Microphone. Okay.
We can hear you, I think.
My name is Odile Harvey. I'm covering for a regional radio in France, in Brittany, where in fact we have an association, Armor India, which has been started by an industrialist who works in India for his company. And then when he retired, he started that association and bringing wonderful Indian culture to this remote part of France. Now, last night, I saw on French television a program which has usually good reputation. It's Envoyé Spécial on France 2. And they describe all the discriminations about the Muslims, about the Christians in very cruel terms. And was that program exaggerated? you can still sit on the,
Well,
outside.
ma'am,
And I know you're going to France, so I just would like to know about the situation of all those discriminations in India. Thank you.
I mean, of course, I would have to see the program before I can comment on whether it was exaggerated or not. So I don't know what that program was saying. But certainly there is an increase in discrimination and in violence in India, and there is a full-scale assault on the democratic institutions of our country. That everybody knows, and internally in India it's been commented on, and globally it's been commented on. Of course, minorities are under attack, but so are many other communities. Dalit communities, tribal communities, lower caste communities are also under attack. There is a attempt to change the nature of our country. Our country, in the constitution, is described as a union of states, and we believe that the most critical aspect of our union is the conversation between members of our union. And there is an alternative vision, which is the BJP vision, which believes that power should be centralized, power should be concentrated, wealth should be concentrated, and the conversation between members of the union, between people of India, should be suppressed. And so this is the fight between two visions. I like to term it the fight between Mahatma Gandhi's vision and Nathuram Godse's vision. Nathuram Godse being the person who assassinated our leader.
Follow-up question.
Yeah, so there are a lot of people here who had no idea you were here, Indians I'm talking about, and they would have liked a public meeting. A lot of sort of, people who identify themselves as liberal Indians who still believe in the idea of, a pluralistic India. And they were like, oh, he's here, we have no idea, why is there no public meeting?
And
So why do you think
is-
you not organize that
No,
to
there
sort
is-
of meet, have an open, if I'm allowed to finish, an open meeting to meet all kinds of Indians who would have liked to sort of just see you or, or talk to you. And the second question is
Let's deal with one question at a time.
But everybody's been asking too.
Relax.
You can ask two.
No,
if
one
you want.
second.
Take
So,
one at a
so
time.
when we design these tours, we have a structure, and the organizers decide whether we are going to have closed door meetings, whether we're going to have public meetings and stuff like that, depending on the length of the tour and the type of place we're going to. So I guess in Belgium, we sort of opted for a model. By the way, hundreds of people are coming and meeting us, and pretty much everybody in Belgium who of Indian origin knows exactly where I am, and they've been coming by droves to come and see me. But I think we decided that a full-blown Indian-style public meeting in Belgium might not be the best way to do it.
You've said in the past you were spied on by the government. Is that still true? Do you have any more information? Are you still being spied on by the Indian government?
I mean, the fact that Pegasus was on my phone is a known fact. I mean, I don't know the details of how I'm tracked, but I'm certainly tracked for sure.
Yes.
In fact, just going back to the Bharat Jodo Yatra, there is also, I think I'm very loud. Everybody can hear me. All right. I have heard a lot of speeches before, starting 2014 onwards. You have been mentioning a very, very important, crisis that is coming up in India. The unemployment of the youth, which is at the highest level right now. While you were on your yatra across the country, did you meet the youth, and did this issue actually really come up many times?
Yeah, I
in
did.
various states?
I met thousands and thousands of youngsters, and all of them said exactly what you're saying. The three things they said: number one, unemployment; number two, huge increase in the levels of poverty and completely skewed income distribution. So few people getting very, very wealthy, and the bulk of people, being pushed back into poverty, and then rising prices and inflation. Those were the three things that repeatedly they told me. The fact of the matter is that India has the highest unemployment that it's had in the last 40 years. So there is something clearly wrong with our economic model. It's not accepted, and there's a lot of media support for the government. So those type of things don't come out. But I don't think the current path we are on, economic path we are on, is sustainable in any way. And there will certainly be consequences and a backlash to this model.
Yes, sir.
My name is Nadeem Bhatt. I am from ARI News. You have just talked about the minorities in India. I would like to ask about Kashmir. What is your party's stance on the current situation in Kashmir, and what step do you believe should be taken to address the ongoing conflict there? How do you view the role of international diplomacy in resolving the Kashmir issue, and what would be your approach if your party comes into power?
Kashmir is, of course, an integral part of India, so it's nobody's business other than our own, other than India's business. Our position, as I stated earlier, is very clear. It's in a working committee resolution. We can give you a copy of that resolution if you're interested in reading it. But I feel that it's very important, the general discussion we're having here, that democratic institutions, democratic structures need to be protected in India, and the voice of people needs to be defended and protected. And that goes for every single part of India, including Kashmir.
This is obviously been conversation now about the name of the subcontinent, and your yatra was called Bharat Jodo, and now
We're now having a name change.
yes, is that happening? What are your
I don't know.
views
You
on
have to ask the Prime Minister. I mean,
Do you want to change?
it? Do you want to change the
these are.
Bharat Jodo? So is
I
that
am perfectly happy with the names that we have in our constitution. India, that is Bharat, works perfectly well for me. But I think these, in a sense, to me, are panic reactions. There's a little bit of fear in the government. These are distraction tactics. We, of course, came out with the name India for our coalition, and it's a fantastic idea because it represents exactly who we are. We consider ourselves to be the voice of India, and so the word works very well. But it's obviously disturbed the Prime Minister enough that he wants to change the name of the country, which is absurd, but that's what it is. It's also interesting that every time we raise the issue of Mr. Adani and crony capitalism, the Prime Minister comes out with some dramatic new diversion tactic. It's curious that just after I did a press conference on Adani, this entire diversion is put into place. It's interesting.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
EU journalist for Radio Novo Time. Again, thank you. In view of the COP28, the climate conference in Dubai, what are your expectations? And do you think that India is going to be the major spokesperson for the Global South? Thank you.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think India has a relationship with the Global South, and I think there are bonds there, historical bonds there, that make us close to the Global South. I don't know if we are the spokesman of the Global South, but certainly we have a relationship with them. On the environment, of course, we are, as a planet, going through these large transitions, energy transition in the way we move. And I think environment is a central issue for India. It's, of course, not in a country where there are many poor people. It's difficult to make environment top of mind but I think it is a critical issue, and it's very important that we think about it in a strategic and a long-term way.
Thanks. Brian Ricketts, representing the European coal industry, and I've enjoyed visits to European coal industry, and I've enjoyed visits to coal power plants and mines in India. And my hope for the future is a democratic India. And the question relates to that. As China developed very rapidly over the last few decades, its economy became imbalanced, and it's now paying the price for that, I believe. How would you ensure that India's economy doesn't become imbalanced? So how to balance the powers of a market-based economy versus central planning?
I think one of the lessons that I learned in my walk was that there is an inherent and profound wisdom in the people of my country, right? Regardless of which part of society they're in. For example, we're discussing environment. The type of conversations I had with tribal people about the environment were far more sophisticated than I have with people living in cities, right? So there is an inherent wisdom in the people of India, and I'm sure in the people of Europe and people of Belgium. And I think it's critical for us that in decision making, we listen to the voice and the intelligence of the people. And that's where we have a fundamental difference with the BJP. We value the voice of the people, we value the voice of poor people, we value the voice of all stakeholders, and we want to hold a conversation with stakeholders before we make decisions. It's sometimes slower, but in the long run, it works out much better. And that's really the conflict that is taking place in India. They're of the view that you don't need to ask people, you just go ahead and slam everything through. But in our view, there's consequences. With regards to the public sector and the private sector, we are pretty clear that in key strategic areas, public sector should have a role. In education, in healthcare, public sector should provide a foundation. But in other spaces, private industry is probably a better tool to achieve most aims.
Just one or two more.
One
Quick.
very quick one.
But you asked you asked 4 questions.
What would you
You've asked 3 or 4 questions.
I'll be
Yeah, please. Thank you. Anybody else?
Nobody else, go ahead.
Then one or two. That's it.
I think the agenda that you're talking about, mostly what has been happening in the election manifestos, usually, the manifestos of the parties, that's how the elections were initially fought or held, where parties came and spoke about the manifestos. Now, with all the changes that have happened in India, we know so many PSUs have been privatized or are on the verge of being privatized in India. How, in case in next year's elections, in case tables turn and we see the opposition and the alliance probably coming forward and running the country, how do you think those kind of changes that were, that are so massive that have been happening can be reverted
which
or
changes?
corrected? The privatization of public sector units,
Yeah.
that has been happening in India. How do you actually rectify that? Because that has actually taken away employment of so many housewives. No, I mean, women like my mother would probably be a very good candidate for an SBI, banking job, but a private sector will not necessarily employ a person of her age and will look for a more competitive, growth. So I think that's where I see a lot of people will lose employment because of this in India and are doing that. How does this get rectified?
Where we draw the line is the notion of crony capitalism, right? We don't have a problem with the private sector. We don't have a problem with the government sector. Where we draw the line is where 1 or 2 people start to financially control the whole country, right? And where 1 or 2 people or 3 people are running everything. That's where our problem begins. There's another element to this, which is that government policies in India have systematically attacked the backbone of our employment system. If you look at who gives employment in India, it's the small and medium industry that gives employment in India. And demonetization and GST have devastated those structures, right? So it's a two-pronged problem with Mr. Adani. Is he controls the ports, he controls the airports, he controls agriculture, he controls the grain silos, he has real estate. I mean, he's everywhere. And he's dominant everywhere. He controls cement, right? So we think that's counterproductive for the country. And on one side, they are pushing this very monopolistic capital. And on the other side, they're devastating the small and medium people from where we're going to get a job. That's why we're having an unemployment crisis. And the second part is where you require key services, right? Country like India requires the government to be involved in education. It requires the government to be involved in healthcare. And the idea that you can just privatize education and privatize healthcare, it devastates the poorest people because they simply do not have access to this. So they are hitting this from 3 or 4 sides, and the solutions are pretty clear. I mean, we would invest much more in health and education. We would protect small and medium businesses. We would try to build an economy where small and medium businesses transition to medium businesses and then to large businesses and then to massive businesses, right? If you look at our small and medium businesses, almost none of them become big businesses, right? They remain small or they die, right? And it's because of policy. So you can change policies to ensure that you start building champions in these smaller and medium spaces, and you can certainly invest much more in education and healthcare. I'm not saying there's no role for private businesses in education. There is, but the mainstay of any education system in a country like India has to be, it's a government responsibility, and the government can't just say, okay, we are going to, abrogate from this responsibility. So the things that can be done and need to be done are pretty clear. They're not complicated. And if you look at our last manifesto, I think we ironed out quite a few of these ideas. One of the other ideas that we have, which we've tested now, you can get a sense of how we think about these things by looking at our states. So if you look at the healthcare system in Rajasthan, that'll give you a good sense of what we are thinking in terms of healthcare for the country. If you look at our social programs in Karnataka, you get a sense of how we are thinking about social programs for the country. So we tend to run a pilot somewhere, see if it works, and then scale it up. And, for example, Manrega was such a case where we ran a small pilot, then we scaled it into a state, and then we scaled it into the nation. We don't believe in, these rash decisions where you suddenly demonetize the economy or you suddenly impose a GST. We believe in seeding an idea, letting that idea grow, testing the idea, and then scaling it across. Chhattisgarh has some very good ideas on how to support farmers with minimum prices. Karnataka has our, the sort of support that we're giving to women in Karnataka. That's some very interesting work that's going on. And in each one of our states, you can see the sort of type of ideas that we will use when we come to power.
Last question.
When you were talking to the parliamentarians, you said it was a conversation and you were informing them about sharing, your reading of what's happening in India. And you have repeated here that, there are problems back home when it comes to institutions and democratic structures. What was their response to you? Did they seem concerned? Did they seem...
Yeah, they were very concerned. They were very concerned, and they felt that they felt that there is an attempt to stifle the democratic structures of India, for sure. And I mean, they were very, very clear with us.
Okay.
You have more questions?
You have more questions? You
No,
have
I
more
think,
questions?
I think,
thought we gave
I
you
think
enough
5 questions for one person is good enough. I mean, if you, you know.
Okay. Well,
Responses are coming to everybody. No
thank you.
offense.
No, but thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you very much.
And we hope to see you again. Be in touch. Thank you.
What a day! What a day, my friends. Dear Member of Parliament, dear Rahul Gandhi, Madame la Ministre, chère Brune Poirson, Monsieur le Ministre, cher Hubert Védrine, Monsieur le Ministre, cher Brice Lalonde, Your Excellencies, dear Ambassadors, dear Dean of PSIA, cher Arantxa, dear Professor Christophe Jaffrelot, dear guests, dear professors, dear students. Mr. Gandhi, this is a special day for us. This is a special day in your university. Welcome to Sciences Po and thank you so much for your presence in Paris, on our campus. You're just arriving from Brussels. I think that tomorrow you will be in Rotterdam. And we are very, very happy to have you with us today at Sciences Po. It's a great honor for me to welcome you to our university for this unique opportunity for a dialogue with our students and faculty. There is no need to say what an important Indian leader, and I must say a worldwide leader you are, and what role you have played for almost 20 years in the public arena. You currently serve as a member of the Indian Parliament from Kerala, and you used to serve as the president of the Congress Party, today's main opposition party to the party in power. You are one of the most important voices in today's India, and you have emerged as a strong voice on the wider international scope. And I have to say, I must admit that I'm also very impressed by your 25 million followers on X, formerly Twitter. Thank you for coming to Sciences Po at this very specific moment of time. We are very much aware of everything you went through in the last month. You are also visiting us on the eve of the G20 summit hosted in Delhi, while BRICS have just extended their network to 6 new countries. The key role of India grows every day, and we are delighted to offer our students the unique opportunity to listen to you and exchange with you, along with Professor Jaffrelot and Dean Gonzalez. My dear friends, again, Mr. Gandhi, thank you for choosing Sciences Po during your short visit to France. We all look forward to this 90 minutes with you. Thank you very much. Tani Ya Vad. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Matthias. This was a very good way to start what we hope would be a great dialogue. So we've been following your Bharat Jodo Yatra across India. We've seen the many kilometers that you've done over 137 days. We're really grateful that you took a detour to come to Paris. And the first question I would have for you is, we look at India and we see a country whose economy is growing, a country which creates technology, that innovates, but also a country with millions of people still in extreme poverty. So what is it that needs to be done to make sure that all these citizens are not left behind, that they also enjoy the benefits of this global progress?
I mean, that's a very complicated question. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here. I'd rather be sitting there, frankly, but I don't have that choice anymore. Thank you for your time. India in our constitution is defined as India, that is Bharat, a union of states. So these states, they have got together and formed India or Bharat. And the most important thing is that the voice of all the people who are included in these states is heard loud and clear, and no voice is crushed, intimidated, because I believe that India has an inherent wisdom, that it has a very long history, a long tradition, and my experience has been that regardless of whether people are poor or rich, they have a sense of what India should be doing and where it should be going. So to me, the first step is protecting that voice and making sure that the institutions, the structures that protect that voice are working and are defended. That's where the whole thing begins. And I state that because when we use words like democracy, what we're actually talking about is the voice of people. And listening effectively to that voice, allowing that voice expression is central to any success. And we've experienced that pretty much everything that we've achieved so far, whether it is our economic growth, our ability to manage our differences, the bedrock of it is this idea that we protect the voice of all our people. And our leader, Mahatma Gandhi, said it best when he said that the most important voice is the one that's last in the line. It's the most difficult voice to protect. And a nation that is doing that will succeed.
Wow. I was quite impressed by that answer and the link that you make to democracy. There is at the moment a big international gathering taking place in India. It's called the G20. So on which side is India in international relations? At the end of the day, this is also a place where we study international affairs, right? So on whose side is India?
There was a leader in India once, and they were asked, on whose side are you? Do you lean left or do you lean right? And she said, no, we stand straight in the middle. So I don't, when you're dealing with a country the size of India, we have to have relationships with multiple different countries. And I think it's a simplification to say, whose side are you on? The blunt answer to that is we are on our own side. And as a nation, we act in our interest. And we do whatever suits us with regards to our interest. I don't think it's so black and white. Are you on this person's side or are you on that person's side? For a large country like ours, it becomes very difficult to come up with an answer for that. But we do have a strong view that voice and democracy are important. I'm sure many of my friends from India will understand this. This notion of, clear-cut black and white, this is not an Indian notion. Indian people, their basic architecture is designed to deal with much more complexity and much more nuance. So I don't necessarily buy the, you're either on this side or you're on this side. But I can see clearly that there is a problem, right? And that problem requires a solution. It's a global problem, and more than a global problem, it's a problem for India, it's a problem for Europe, and it's a problem for the United States. And frankly, it's a problem for all of you in this room, because you're going to have to deal with the problem. And the problem is that we have a planet today where the bulk of production, the bulk of manufacturing, the bulk of value addition is being done in China. And I'm not going to comment on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. The Chinese have successfully competed against us and achieved it, right? There is a problem with, in my view, there is a problem with the way they do it. They produce, they're very good at producing, they produce the phone in my pocket, they produce the camera, but they do it in non-democratic, coercive conditions. And the problem is that for us, we need to think about production in a democratic environment, production in a non-coercive environment, and we need to be able to compete with them. Meaning, they don't need to give their population political freedom. They can just give them economic freedom and then become the center of production globally. We have to produce and compete with them, and we have to give our people political freedom and economic freedom. So that is really the challenge. I don't see it as, a confrontation with China. China has placed on the table a way of working, a way of production. And I think it is important for the United States, for India, for Europe, to place an alternative system, an alternative method on the table. And I think we owe it to, certainly we owe it to our population, and I think the French and the Europeans owe it to their population, because we are not going to be able to, manage our countries. We're not going to be able to give students like you jobs without doing that. So to me, it's an opportunity to say, can we produce in democratic structures, within democratic frameworks?
Lady over there.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Lydia Jaikumar. I want to ask about the violence against minorities in India. In particular, because this is close to my heart, violence, caste atrocities in India. Every day we hear, people from the Dalit community killed or violence against them because they went to a wedding, because they went to the school, because they, things that are our rights, just because we're, accessing it, there's violence against people in the Dalit community. What do you think needs to be done? Because it's societal, but it's also institutional, and it seems like there is no answer to it and there is no help from it. So.
No, I think it needs to be combated. I think it requires a political imagination, and I think it is very important that it is done. What the BJP and the RSS are trying to do, the heart of what they're trying to do, is trying to stop the expression, the participation of lower castes, other backward castes, tribals, and minority communities. And for me, in India, where a Dalit person or a Muslim person, tribal person, upper caste person, anybody is being mistreated, is being attacked, is not the India I want. So I think it's very important that this question is taken head on, but I don't think that the type of political imagination that is required is currently there. It ebbs and flows. So you have these movements, you have this expression, and then they ebb away. And I think we're at one of those points where they've sort of ebbed away, and we need to reconstruct the political imagination that will, solve the problem you're talking about. For me, this is the central problem in India. This is bigger than any other problem.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Hi, thank you for the conversation. My name is Tanishq Saha, and I guess I had a question related to a term you used earlier on in the speech, Bharat. And there is a lot of discussion going around social media right now with a potential renaming, rebranding, whatever you might call it. But does this kind of change of a more popular name? We all know India has been named Bharat since its inception, but is there a point or some value to be derived in changing this name in the international perspective, in the weight we can bring to discussions, to be on our own side as you speak?
Well, the Constitution actually uses both names, right? So the line in the Constitution is the line I started with. India, that is Bharat, is a union of states. So I don't really see a problem there. Both words are perfectly acceptable. But I think maybe we irritated the government a little bit because we named our coalition India, so that got them all heated up. And now they've decided to change the name of the country. I mean, you know how these things are. I mean, we could always give our coalition a second name as well. So, I don't think it'll solve the purpose. But people act in strange ways. What do you think about it?
I personally believe it might not be the best thing to focus on right now, especially given that the country is at the lens, it's at the focus of this big summit that's taking place. World leaders are there to discuss so many different issues. I found that it could have been something that could be tabled for a later moment if it was necessary, and I don't know, focus about issues inside and other issues.
You're right, but there is something deeper that is going on, which is that people who want to change the name of anything are basically trying to deny history, right? The fact of the matter is, whether we like it or we don't like it, we have a history. We were ruled by the British. We fought the British. We defeated the British, right? I'm sure the English don't like it, but English is spoken by more Indians than English people. It's our language, more than theirs. Right? And we speak it in our own way. We twist it and we turn it maybe in ways they don't like. So the English that is spoken in India is actually a different expression, right? That is spoken in England. Embedded in that English is a huge history, a lot of pain, a lot of happiness, imagination, struggle. Those things are embedded. And the people who want to change the name want to erase that. They don't want that the history of our country is known to our future generation. It disturbs them. Right? I believe that we should accept our history. If we were ruled by the British for 100, 200 years, okay, we dealt with it, and let's move on. So it's a deeper question.
Thank you. We're going to go up there.
Hello, my name is Lydia Bilali. I am a student here at Sciences Po. And for the past 3 months, I've been interning as a research intern at the German Institute for Global and Area Studies on a project that focuses on the weaponization of anti-fake news laws in South and Southeast Asia. And I've been researching a lot of dozens and dozens of cases of journalists in India that have been targeted and silenced and punished by using the Indian Penal Code. So with this consideration, my question is double. So firstly, how can we continue justifying and saying that India is the largest and biggest democracy in the world? And two, what is the opposition doing to help these civil society members? Thank you.
I mean, I walked across the country 4,000 kilometers to raise some of these issues. What you're saying is absolutely correct. The there is a tendency now to intimidate, to threaten, not just members of civil society. I have 24 cases on me. I've got a criminal defamation judgment against me. The first time in Indian history that somebody has been given the maximum sentence for criminal defamation. Very convenient that I needed the exact number of days that they gave me to be disqualified. So we are dealing with this issue. The democratic expression is deeply embedded in India. And the fight to keep the democratic structure of India alive is ongoing and very vibrant. We are part of that fight. Now, when that fight is over, if that fight is over, and the other side wins, then I would agree with you. But that has not happened yet, and I do not think it's going to happen. We are going through a process. We are going through turbulence in our democratic structure, and there are millions of people, I'm sure many, many youngsters in this room, who really believe in that democratic structure and are going to defend it with everything that they've got. So it's a fight, and I think it's also an opportunity to rethink and to reimagine our country. There are many things that can do with improvement, and I think this is an opportunity, this is a test that many countries go through, and I think we'll come out just fine in this test.
Gentleman up. Hi there, yes. So I am a master in social policy here at Sciences Po. While it might not quite look it, I'm actually also part Indian, and over this past few years, it's been particularly scary to see many of my friends and family members back in India become radicalized by Hindu nationalist rhetoric. My question to you is, if your coalition gets elected, where exactly do you see yourself placing the role of Hinduism in a post-BJP India? And how concretely do you propose dismantling or perhaps even transforming the legacy of a religious zeitgeist which has captured the hearts and minds of so many Indians today?
Look, I've read the Gita, I've read a number of the Upanishads, I've read many Hindu books. There's nothing Hindu about what the BJP does. There's absolutely nothing Hindu about what they do, right? I have not read anywhere, in no Hindu book, from no learned Hindu person, have I ever heard that you should terrorize, harm people who are weaker than you. I've never read this. So this idea, this word, Hindu nationalists, this is a wrong word. They're not Hindu nationalists. They are nothing to do with Hinduism. They are out to get power at any cost, and they will do anything to get power, and they will do anything to ensure that the Indian caste structure, the social structure of my country is not threatened. They want dominance of a few people, and that is what they're about. There is nothing Hindu about them.
Thank you. Very clear. Gentlemen.
Hi, thank you for being here. My name is Zaid Wahidi. I'm a lawyer based in Paris. My question is about the opposition's narrative for the next election. And I saw that Ms. Sonia Gandhi wrote a letter identifying 9 points to the Prime Minister. Is that the opposition's pitch? Because as a minority, of course, it's important for me to have the Pyar Ki Dukaan in a Nafrat Ka Bazaar. But is there another issue, or are there certain issues that you have identified that will perhaps build more consensus with even the majority community and get you where you are, where you want to be in 2024?
When you see the people on the stage in the India coalition, you must realize that more people from the majority community vote for us than vote for the BJP. 60% of India votes for us. 40% of India votes for them. right? So this idea that the majority community is voting for the BJP, this is a wrong idea. The majority community actually votes more for us than they vote for them, right? They do polarize society. They divide society. They spread hatred in society. And that is their mechanism. They also happen to have very good relationships with the most powerful, richest crony capitalists in the land, who finance them, support them, help them do what they do. And so this is the architecture that stands behind the BJP. The idea that Mr. Narendra Modi is orchestrating this thing is a gross simplification. Mr. Narendra Modi is an instrument of the architecture. And I'm pretty confident that the RSS can get rid of Narendra Modi in 5 minutes if they want to, right? It is a structure that is doing this. And that structure is now a threat to Indian democracy. So we are committed to fighting that structure. What are the broader elements? The first thing is the gross inequality that is taking place in India, right? Few business people who are billionaires. The third richest person on the planet was Indian, and 90% of India going back into poverty, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is we have to solve what I was talking about earlier. We keep talking about economic growth. You read the newspapers about economic growth, right? Have you ever read in the newspaper next to the economic growth question the employment question? Has anybody in the newspaper said, wait a minute, we are growing at 7%, 8%, but we have the highest unemployment rate in 40 years? That's a much more interesting question to me. Because we can grow at 9% and give none of you jobs. Right? That's what's happening. Right? So that's the second big question. And the third question that is very close to my heart is the large mass, the real power of India is in the lower castes, the other backward castes, these communities. And they are not given any space in the governance of India. They're not given any space in corporate India. They're not given any space anywhere. And that to me is a crime. So those would be the central thrusts of how we would think about it. The final thing I would say is that one way to look at India is that it is making a transition from rural to urban. And the largest migration of people from rural to urban in human history ever is taking place in India and China. Right? And if we're going to be making this transition, this is a frightening transition for a lot of people. So we need to give them the basic minimum architecture to make this transition safely. What does that mean? That we spend a serious amount of money on education. We spend a serious amount of money on healthcare. That government does not abrogate responsibility for healthcare and education. And that we provide a minimum floor where India commits to all its people that no matter what happens, you can simply not go below that floor. We will give you a minimum income below which no matter what happens, you're not going to go. But, when I talk to students, especially the Indian students here, and the students who are not from India, the injustice that the caste system in India does, the pain and trauma that the caste system in India causes is beyond anything I know anywhere else in the world. And so I see my politics as challenging the idea that there should be this caste order in India, that there should be this permanent hierarchy in India, and that some people, should have access to all the institutions, all the structures, and other people should just live a life of poverty and misery. So this would be the framework that the Indian coalition would be talking about and thinking about.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
Thank you, ma'am.
And by the way, when I said minimum floor, I didn't only mean financial floor. So I think the idea that 200 million people can feel uncomfortable in India today, or Sikhs can feel uncomfortable in India today, I think that is a matter of shame for us. And I think that needs to be corrected. And there are minorities who feel that way. There are lower caste people who feel that way. There are women who feel that way. And so we are very strongly committed to this.
Good evening, Mr. Gandhi. My name is Smriti Bhatt, and I'm a master's student from Social Policy and Social Innovation. As you already have answered partly my questions, I would try to keep it short. The place in Delhi which is being, where people are being mobilized in lieu of G20 is Badarpur, where you plan to go.
The slum?
G20.
Yeah, okay. Where they have been, their slum.
Yeah. You plan to go there, so I'm just like letting you know the name of the place.
They'll be very annoyed with you, by the way.
It's okay. It's okay. In all honesty and humility, I wish to ask you if there is a defined secularism or a future of defined secularism in the country. If the party comes to power in the next elections, how do you specifically counter the hate and the chest thumping that has happened in the past few years regarding religion and education? And you can choose to answer whichever.
You know, literally, if the Prime Minister tomorrow morning, that doesn't resolve the earlier question about institutions, which is this sort of disease that has now entered the Indian institutional framework, where the neutrality of those institutions has gone out of the window. And I think there, frankly, we will have to make examples of people. We'll have to make sure that some of the people who have done what they have done pay a significant price for what they've done, so that anybody who's thinking about doing it again understands that they will also pay the price for attacking the soul of India. Because that is how I see it. This is an attack on the soul of India, and the people doing this should pay a price for it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question goes to the gentleman.
Hi, my name is Arman. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So my question, I attended one of your speeches at the Bharat Jodo Yatra, and I remember when you mentioned crony capitalism, the crowd went wild. They were all like, Adani. And so there's this feeling clearly on the ground that this kind of top-down development is happening, right, in India, economic development, where there is crony capitalism, like you said. And my question is, if we are to decentralize power, where the state is less involved in all affairs, economic affairs, etc., how would you or how would your coalition ensure that the concentration of wealth does not take place in a few corporations?
By the way, just because you have decentralization of power doesn't mean the state is less involved. The state is just involved at a different level, right? But the state is still involved. The center is not involved. So for example, if you go to Kerala, I'll give you an example. I'm the member of Parliament of Kerala. If I want to take any decision in my constituency, I have to speak to the local body people. I can't just as a member of parliament suddenly say, I now am deciding to do this. They'll come to me and say, how did you do that? You have to have a conversation with us. So it roots you very quickly, because they can charge me a price. They can send me the bill, right? So decentralization does not mean that that the state is walking away. The state is just coming at in a different level, right? So what was the second part of your question?
So how would you ensure that, monopolies don't happen in India?
look, what you're having in India today with Mr. Adani is so blatant and it's completely so over the top, right? I don't think there's any other place where this is going on. The gentleman is in, pretty much every single business, right? As people know, he's manipulating, he's sending money out of India. He's manipulating his stock price. He's using that money to buy Indian assets. It's a big circle, And part of the reason the Prime Minister suddenly got so excited about this Bharat issue is because of the Adani story. Everybody knows it, we know it, that there are very close linkages between the Prime Minister and Mr. Adani. The documentation is available, right? And he's not going to get away with it. Eventually, he's going to be held accountable for it. So it is so over the top that it's completely ridiculous. However, you can have policy structures that seriously affect how you distribute income. I'll give you an example. The GST, right, is a tax on small and medium businesses. Small and medium business has to hire an accountant, has to go through a whole process, which costs him relatively much more than it costs Mr. Adani, right? Demonetization is an assault on small businesses. Demonetization wasn't about black money. It was about breaking the back of small and medium businesses in India to pave the way for an Adani. So how you define policy and how you think about policy, where you put money, fundamentally determines how you distribute it, right? So those things are not difficult to do. Manrega, do you think Manrega distributes wealth? Hugely. Right to food distributes wealth. Supporting small and medium businesses distributes wealth. Developing skills distributes wealth. Destroying small and medium businesses concentrates wealth. GST applied the way it is concentrates wealth. What you did during COVID concentrates wealth. Giving a free pass to every large business guy and forgiving their loans and not forgiving the loans of farmers concentrates wealth. So what you do is very clear. It's not complicated. And we have a history of doing it.
Can I have the last
So
question,
as we're coming to an end, I
question?
wanted to see if you had a recommendation or a parting message for these students. At the end of the day, you're the chairman.
This is quite an unfair process here because I've been asked, I don't know how many questions, and I'm not allowed to ask even one question.
But that's the nature of the game.
So I would quite like to know from the students here. I mean, I didn't study in Paris. I studied in the US and in England. What is it like to study here? No, but I'm going for dinner this evening, I believe. You can come with us for dinner this evening.
I would really ask you now to give a huge applause to our guest speaker.
So should I conclude?
I think
Do you want to know about riots?
I think we have concluded, yes.
I'll just say 2 words.
Please.
So just to finish and not to drag it on too long, I see a lot of Indian students here, and I also see a lot of French students, European students, and students from all over the world. I think it's very important that we build a bridge between India and your countries. And I would like to invite as many of you as possible to come to India. Of course, the Indian people come all the time, but the people who are not Indian, to come to India, take a look at what is going on, and seize a lot of the opportunities that a democratic, productive India can bring to the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a chaotic and fun place. So do come. And if there's anything we can help you with, especially the Indian students, please let us know. I'm happy to come and try your restaurant with you if you want. Thank you.